Hi, I'm Vincent. I'm an alcoholic. And I am most happy to be here. Thank you once again for inviting Pat and I to Montana. She got a little bit of a cold, and she's insincere, but I'm here. I'd like you to tell her that when you see her, too. But it's good to be here. I want to thank Kevin and Kara and Michael for being such gracious hosts to me. They've taken such good care of me. They, where else can you go and get two Indian guides? You know, they absolutely took wonderful care of me, and I'm glad I'm here. I want to and to see old friends, John and Carlene and Richard and especially Teresa, who dumped me for dinner. Incidentally, I guess she had other friends she'd rather be with. But I'm glad to see her. And I think she's terrific. And she's a good example of AA and certainly of the finance class. I have to correct something. During the finance class this afternoon, we had a young lady who said she had $160,000 worth of student loans. As I said, 800. Did I say that? $860,000 in student loans. Turns out it's only $86,000. Okay. Which, I mean, it's only that amount. She could pay it off this week. You know what I mean? But anyway, that's good that we corrected that, because that was baffling me all afternoon. Really, she must have gone to the Sorbonne, Harvard, Yale, and a couple dozen other places. But anyway, it's good to be here, and I must say, I want to welcome, if you're new, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's where you are tonight, incidentally. In case you don't know, you're in AA, which is, Jesus, is that grim, huh? Good grief. AA, I mean, God. That is really, that is the bottom of the barrel, isn't it? I mean, AA, it's come to this. You're in AA, and geez, that's the way that I felt. If you're anything at all like I was when I was new, you'll be, this is just, it's confusing, first of all. It's illogical, doesn't make any sense. And you hear contradictory things perpetually, it seems. For example, you are in a room filled with a couple hundred people who cannot manage their own lives, but will be delighted to take yours on. And hopefully you'll allow them to do it, because that's the prescription here, or so it seems. We tell you, the first thing we tell you when you get here is you're powerless over alcohol and essentially over your life. And then as soon as you've digested that, we tell you, well, there is a power here, but it's not yours. It is certainly not yours. And if you're willing to turn your life and your will, everybody's willing to turn their life over. It's your will that you don't really want to turn over. But if you're willing to do that, then that power works for you, and it's yours. But so it's contradictory. I know that if you're anything at all like I was when I was new, you are utterly convinced down deep in your soul that you are not really alcoholic, that you're not really like them, that your case is different. And you could really explain it if someone would listen to you for about 10 minutes, right? And especially with sponsors, isn't that true? I always felt if my sponsor would listen to me for only about 10 minutes more, I could make him understand. He really wasn't too bright, but if he could, if he would listen to me for a while longer, I could make him understand what was really wrong. But sponsors are not like that, are they? They're very close-minded and narrow-minded, and they really just they're not interested much in what you have to say. They're only interested in telling you to do things that apparently make no sense. Isn't that true? They're having you do things that are not even related to what's wrong with you all the time. That's what, and if you're new and you're wondering about that, I'm with you. I understand what that's like. It's just that's the way sponsors are. But anyway, if you have those kind of feelings, you're in the right place. And I know if you're new, although perhaps we've never met you, we know all about you. We know, for example, that this has been a bad year. Things have not gone well this year. And the end, the sum total of that is you're in AA, which is not where you intended to be. That is the way that I felt when I was sitting in my first AA meeting, which was a long time ago now. It was in November of 1965. I know, girls. You're thinking, he cannot be that old. I understand that. It's true. I was only 5 at that meeting. But it was a long time ago. It was in the basement of a Presbyterian church in Long Beach, California. And it was on a cold, rainy November evening. And I got into that room as a result of having nowhere else to go. And the meeting that night, it was surprising to me. I was stunned, actually, because nobody in that room, it was a big speaker meeting, much like this, a couple hundred people, and they were all in this room, and they were dressed well. The men seemed to have coats and ties, and the ladies were dressed well, and everybody seemed to be, there was a certain electricity that was going on, and it always does in a good meeting, doesn't it? You can always feel it, and you could certainly feel it there. People were, they were just involved with each other. They cared about each other. That was clear. And there was some kind of action going on. And the overwhelming, surprising characteristic is that nobody in that room looked like an alcoholic. They all looked good. They looked terrific. And if you were to wander into that room on any given Friday evening and someone were to say to you, you're in a room filled with alcoholics, pick some out. You wouldn't be able to pick anybody. Well, you picked me out. On the night I was there, my first night, I had on a filthy T-shirt and a ripped pair of jeans, and I had not shaved or bathed in over a week, and I had spent the previous 5 days in the Long Beach City Jail due to a series of unfortunate circumstances that were clearly not my fault. The police department in Long Beach is fascist, as it turns out, and they had abused my civil rights on a regular basis in those days. And I ended up in the Long Beach City Jail. And I ended up in that AA meeting. And I sat in the back of the room up against the wall. And I should tell you, I am Irish and Catholic, and I'm from New Jersey. And you have a problem with that? And I have great difficulty with people from Texas. We have a chemistry problem, or something, I suppose. And I sat next to this guy who was about 6'5", and he had on cowboy boots and a 10-gallon hat in his lap, and his name was Tex. And Tex wanted to hep me. So he told me, he said, "Boy, I'm going to hep you." Right. And I remember thinking, why don't you go hep somebody else? Leave me the hell alone. Who's going to hep me? And the first thing he did was he repeated to me in rapid succession all of the cliches, one after another. And they are dreary, aren't they? I mean, really. I mean, stop it, right? Easy does what? What the hell are you talking about? He finally put his arm around my shoulder and he said, "I keep it simple." I thought, I'll bet you do, Tex. Absolutely no argument with that, let me tell you. Clearly you keep it simple. And he gave me some pamphlets. And on top of the pamphlets was the card that John talked about last night with the 20 questions on it. And in those days, it seemed that old-timers were really, they really wanted you to take this test. Today, it's not quite the same. So many people come here who have the treatment apparatus that you know more about alcoholism than we ever did when we were new. And that's a good thing. That's not bad. But they spent an inordinate amount of time trying to convince you were an alcoholic. And one of the ways was they insisted you take this test. And the 20 questions, the criteria is if you, they were devised incidentally by the medical school at Johns Hopkins, and they researched it and they had determined that the way that you answer these questions can determine whether or not you're an alcoholic. And the criteria is if you answer one question yes, you possibly have a drinking problem. 2 yes, you do in fact have a drinking problem, and 3 or more, and you're an alcoholic. Not a lot of room there, huh? I mean, and so I took this test for Tex. And I answered about 16 or 17 of these questions, yes. I remember I answered no to the question, do you seek lower companions? I could not find any. I mean, where do you go after the Long Beach City Jail? I mean, it's a redundancy. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And the meeting began. And it began the same way we began here this evening. They essentially read what is our program, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know about you, but I didn't hear anything new. None of this was new to me. I mean, as a matter of fact, it was really insulting. I am the end product of 8 years of Dominican nuns and 4 years of Jesuit priests. And I have read Aquinas and Augustine, and this is dribble, quite frankly. This is superficial, utter nonsense. This is childish, prairie Protestant. I can see where it help you. If you were uneducated or a Protestant, this would be fine for you. But in my case, it's clearly different. So somewhere in my subconscious, I dismissed these two. I didn't reason all of that out, but somewhere in my subconscious, I sat in the back of that room and said, my case is different. This doesn't apply to me. And the meeting began. People began to participate, and there were several people who participated, and they were clearly, it seemed to me, nice people who drank too much and came to the Presbyterian church on Friday night, and now they didn't drink anymore, and wasn't all of that wonderful. And, I said to Tex, where do you send the more difficult cases? And he said, shut up. Appropriate. And the meeting continued. And if I had any doubts as to whether I belonged, they were cured at the end of the meeting. They had birthday parties. I mean, dear God. Birthday parties for people who didn't take a drink for a year. They'd have a cake with a candle on it. I mean, it's really embarrassing. It's like something that should take place in a mental institution, isn't it? I mean, really. Maybe in the day room right after dance therapy. We can have birthday parties for the alcoholics. I mean, and the last one was that was really strange. It was a woman. She was about 110, and she apparently had been sober forever. They had a fire on top of this cake, and she got up there and began to blow the candles out. And I didn't know the pulmonary disease would get her. She'd get the candles out first. Kind of a race. And she finally got up here and she said her name was Phoebe and that she was an alcoholic. And then she said something about, did I want what she had? Not tonight, Phoebe. I don't think so. And that was my first AA meeting. And I guess you could safely say that I did not have a spiritual awakening. But I'll tell you what I did. I stayed sober for the next 3 years, right in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And during that period of time, I participated in Alcoholics Anonymous on virtually every level. I did everything there was to do here. I set up chairs, I made coffee, I scrubbed cups, scrubbed ashtrays in those days, chaired meetings, spoke at a young people's committee, did everything there was to do in AA. Except one thing. I did not take these steps. And as a result, my alcoholism got worse. And it got worse while I was sober and busy and involved and socialized in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And there are people here tonight who are probably in that state. And my alcoholism got worse. And it got worse by the day, right in the middle of AA. And there are people here tonight in meeting this big. There's got to be a couple people who are exactly in that state. You've been here some appreciable length of time. And you have a lot of friends. And you're real busy. And you go to a lot of meetings. But you have not taken these steps. And you're getting worse too. And you know you're getting worse. The way you know you're getting worse is you are surrounded by people who are getting better. And you can watch them get better, can't you? No one has to tell you they're getting better here, do they? They wear it. It's all over them. Their eyes, their persona, their sense of purpose. And if you're like me, you look at them and you think, my God, how does that happen? How does that happen to that fool? I mean, bing, there goes another pixie. You know, I used to think that you had meetings that you didn't invite me to. Did you ever feel that way? Where they shared what it really was? Not this. That's the way that's intellectually, that's nonsense, but psychologically, that probably was what I believed. And on the outside, though, however, wonderful things happened to me very quickly. I got a great job. I got in the ground floor in a brand new profession, and I made a lot of money. And let me tell you about my life a little bit. I am the fifth child in a family of 5 kids. I have 4 older sisters. And my youngest sister was 11 when I was born. And my mother was 45 and my father was 50. And this was a long time ago, clearly. And so it was a big deal back in those days. And I was the last child in this, a boy finally, in this big Irish family. And my father was just, he was ecstatic. And my sisters, I mean, the prince had arrived. Okay? That's what it was like. I mean, my sisters would just have fights with each other over who would get to babysit me and dress me in sailor suits and soldier suits during the war, and pictures saluting the flag. I mean, it would make you throw up. It was really, and they just, and my father adored me. Here was a boy after all these girls in this big Irish family, and it was just wonderful. He was the vice president of a railroad, so we were privileged people, and it was just, he never said a cross word to me until the day he died. I don't think I could possibly do anything wrong in my father's eyes. I mean, my earliest memories of Christmas are my father in my bedroom in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve, and he would kneel down beside the bed and he would wake me up and he would say things like, I just saw this sleigh leave. Let's go downstairs. And the entire family would get up and celebrate Christmas at 3 a.m. because my father could not wait. That's why. It's really true. So I was really loved and nurtured and cared for, and given some values, a healthy set of values. And I also should tell you that I am a product of the Roman Catholic Church. You can't get to be more of a product of the Roman Catholic Church than me, I don't suppose. I didn't go to a Catholic college, but that's everything else was. And I'm here to tell you that I was not abused by nuns or molested by priests. And I have not, whatever is wrong with me, it's not the fault of the Roman Catholic Church. My alcoholism is not the fault of the Roman Catholic Church. And neither is yours, incidentally, if you're trying to hang it on them, because I've got news for you. If you write that searching and fearless moral inventory, you find a very disconcerting thing, don't you? In fact, your life is your fault. Wow. Who wants that news? Right? Right. That's not what I'd like to, But that's AA, and that's what you should find. If you wrote an inventory and you didn't come to that conclusion, go write it again. She didn't do it right, in my view. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. And now my parents died within 1 week of each other when I was 12. My father had a heart attack, and my mother, who'd had congestive heart failure for some period of time, passed away a week later. And that was a tough thing. There's no question. I mean, it's a very difficult thing for a 12-year-old kid, and especially from this perfect life, and all of a sudden in 1 week it's completely changed. It's everything has changed. But I like I say, I had this big, huge family, and there was plenty of money for my education, and there was no, all of that was going to be taken care of. So that was not a problem. I have all of my sisters wanted me to go live with them, and they were going to take care of me. One sister in particular, my youngest sister, as a matter of fact, she fought like hell. She wanted to be my guardian, and it turns out she was. But initially, I went to live with my uncle. Oddly enough, who was 65 years old and a bachelor. he had never married. He was a quintessential Irish bachelor. And he was a very powerful man in the state of New Jersey. He was mayor of Jersey City for 20 consecutive years and state chairman of the Democratic Party. He was a boss. He was a political boss. And he felt that, and when my uncle wanted something to happen, it happened. Whether it was in my family or in the entire state of New Jersey, for that matter. I mean, that's what happened. So I went to live with him because he was going to see to it that I was educated and that everything went the right way, and he was an old world man. He was right out of a novel of an Irish politician. He never married. He went to Mass and Communion every day of his life. He read Shakespeare every morning. He was really a self-made, brilliant man, and he certainly did love me. That was clear, and he wanted the very best for me. But he was 65 and I was 12, and we had a communications problem. We would have dinner at opposite ends of a long dining room table every evening in coats and ties. And we would talk politics. That's what we did. That was the mother's milk of our family. But he didn't understand me, and I didn't understand him. And I began to have problems. And my problems were, I am a behavior problem in school. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Any of you here, I'll bet you are. I am a very good student academically. I get A's. I'm a straight A student, but I'm starting to get in trouble. And by trouble, I mean I'm rebellious, and I don't behave well, and there are notes going home, and there are parent conferences, and the conversations start in my family about why do you do this? Why do you get what you have so much promise, right? Your life holds so much promise. Why do you seem to begin to ruin it? I went to 4 different high schools, Jesuit prep schools, 4 different ones, because I was thrown out of the one I was in every year for some kind of bad behavior, and now it had to do with drinking, because I went to school with a lot of other Irish Catholic boys in prep school, and we drink. That's what we do. That is our soul. We are preoccupied with drinking. When we're not drinking, it's how we're going to get to drink the next time, where we're going to get it, how we're going to get it, what kind of party we're going to have, and how can we get the girls from St. Elizabeth's to the party, right? And more importantly, how can we get them drunk? But I was more than that. I got into more trouble, and I drank kind of more than they did. And I didn't get sober as quick as they did. And I was always in trouble, and they seemed to get out of trouble, and I never did. So I would get thrown out of school. In my senior year, I was number 1 in the class academically and due to give the valedictory address at graduation. Except graduation was in June. In May, I got drunk and stole a priest's car. Went joyriding. He happened to be the prefect of discipline, which was always a good choice. And so they told me, not only will you not give the address at graduation, you don't come to graduation. Don't even show up. As a matter of fact, if we ever have a reunion, don't come to that either. Just don't come back near here. And so I got my diploma, and I went on to college, and I went to a very good school in upstate New York, one of the very best in the country, and spent every semester on disciplinary probation in the 60s. I don't know if you know how hard that is. That's a trick. But always good grades, and I stayed drunk and still got. I don't know how that happened, but it did. I was once concurrently on disciplinary probation and the dean's list on one semester. That was, the incongruity is it. And I'm passed out in fraternity parties. Even they get rid of me. Drunken fraternity parties. I act in poor taste at those, which is hard to do. I mean, you can't do that. And I wake up in somebody's car in a snowbank in Ithaca in February, freezing to death almost. And one day I remember, and I'm a blackout drinker, and I don't remember where I've been or what I've done, and they started that early. I remember waking up one very, very uncomfortable morning in this sorority house. Oh, God. In this young lady's room, the house mother standing over there. Oh, Jesus. It was just depressing. I mean, really grim. And that's the way that I behaved. And in the middle of my senior year, we went on a weekend to Manhattan on a drunken weekend, and all of a sudden I woke up and it was Thursday, and everybody had gone back to school on Monday, and that's the way that I drank, and I was hungover and broke, and I called my family to try to get some money, and they said, we're not giving you, when we get back to school on your own, we're done giving you money and supporting this terrible behavior. And so I got into a rage that they wouldn't give me any money. And I showed them who was the captain of my ship. And it was not them. I joined the Navy. Now, I left an Ivy League university in the second semester of my senior year with a 3.8 GPA in biochemistry to join the Navy. All right? And I took the physical in New York, and I took did all of this, and I hadn't said anything to my family. I was going to show them. And I found myself on a train in Penn Station going from New York to Great Lakes Naval Station outside of Chicago for boot camp. And I remember getting on that train, and as we pulled out of Penn Station, I thought, this is bad. This is really a bad mistake. And I went to this Navy chief, and I said to him, I've made a mistake here. I have a paper due back at school. And he said, you're in the Navy, kid, and you are in the Navy. And I remember the train stopped somewhere in Indiana, and I got on a payphone and called my family, and I remember the conversation with my uncle, and he said, you are what? I said, I'm in the Navy. And he said, our Navy? Which shows you where I stood with the relationship with his and I was indeed in the Navy, and we got to Great Lakes, and they shaved my head, and they gave me uniforms, and Christ, I mean, this was absolutely horrible. And the first thing they do, though, in the Navy is they give you tests. And I do very well on written tests. I'm not good at living life, but I'm very good on tests. So I took the basic tests they gave you, and boy, I'll tell you, they called me into this commander's office, and they said, we've looked at your testing, and we have a brand new program in guided missile technology, a nuclear weapons program in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we feel that you're a candidate because you scored high on all of these. Your scores are really, we really think you're a candidate for this. We'd like to consider it. We'll get you a top secret clearance. You'll go train. And I thought, this sounds exciting. If you've got to be in the Navy, I mean, and then they gave me psychological testing and rescinded the offer. They said, we don't think so. So they said, what we think we'll do is make you a corpsman, a Navy corpsman. I was on track to go to a medical school, and I was very interested in medicine, and they said, well, we'll send you to Navy Hospital Corps School, you'll be a corpsman, and serve your time, and you get out. Well, I went to Navy Hospital Corps School. I did very well, because you don't get any liberty, so, I do well. And I loved it. And then they had a more advanced school, which it turned out to be the first physician's assistant program at Bethesda Naval Medical Center. And the idea was to train corpsmen to go on small ships where there were no doctors and actually be the doctor, practice the medicine. And I went to that school, and I did very well. It was a pilot program, and there were 27 of us that started, and only 7 finished. So it was really, quite a program. And they called me in right at the end of that, and they said, we think you're a candidate for Officers Candidate School. We'd like to send you to OCS at Newport, Rhode Island, and commission you an officer, and you'll give us a couple more years, and then you can go back to school, do whatever you want. And I already had a year to do so. I thought this sounded pretty good, so I said okay. So they gave me 30 days leave and $500 to buy new uniforms to go to OCS. Now that didn't turn out well. I ended up in Boston on the 29th day, coming out of a blackout with no money. And my family sent one of my brother-in-laws up to Boston with the money, and they didn't give me the money. They took me out. We bought officers' uniforms and reported to OCS, and did well in OCS, and finished. And 16 weeks later, I was commissioned an ensign in the Navy, an officer and a gentleman. And they gave me orders to the 3rd Marine Division on Okinawa. Good God, as a medical administrative officer. And I thought, geez, so I end up in Okinawa. And I reported in, and they couldn't find a job for me. So they put me in this officers club on the northern end of Okinawa and forgot about me. Just forgot about me. And I forgot about them. Really, I would get up every day about noon, report to the cocktail lounge of the Oak Club for duty, and drink Haig and Haig Pinch. 60 cents a pop. I mean, really cannot. That's great stuff. And I was up there a few weeks, and pretty soon they put another guy up there, and he was a surgeon at a Temple University who had a bad drinking problem. They did not want him around patients, turned out. And they stuck him up in this officers club, and he and I bonded. We kind of became brothers, and we both got up at noon, and nobody bothered us, and before you know it, we grew our hair long, grew beards, wore sandals and shorts, kind of lost track of all of our uniforms after a while. Where the hell they were. Just, that's what we did. And drank all day in the old club and went out in the cities at night. I mean, it was great. And then one day, this Marine lieutenant came into the officers club and wanted to talk to us. And he told us that the regimental commander of the 5th Marines, this bird colonel, was having a dinner party in which all officers in his command had to attend. And we panicked. And we thought, oh, dear God. So we went and got haircuts and shaved and dug some uniforms up and went to the colonel's dinner party. We sat in the back of the room at this table in the back, and we thought that perhaps he wouldn't. You could see his eyes lock right on us. And I said to Doug Mum, I said, oh, God, Jesus, this is bad news. And it was. And he sent some major over to bring us to him. And he said, who are you, gentlemen? You're officers in my command. I've never met you. I don't know who you are. And he said, what do you do? And the major said, well, he's a doctor. I don't know what the other guy does, but they live in the officers club. He said, they live where? He said, in the officers club. He said, give them a job. So, we were put in charge of venereal disease control for the island of Okinawa. And what that consisted of is these Marines would get gonorrhea and syphilis, and they got diseases that were clinically extinct. They did. A disease called lymphogranuloma venereum, which was it hadn't appeared. The last time was in Europe, sometime in the 17th century. And these goddamn Marines would get it, and I would say to them, where the hell do you go? How do you get this stuff? How the hell do you get these bugs? I mean, nobody's seen these bugs. They're only in textbooks, and in Marines, as it turns out. And our job was to go. They would get treated, and our job was to go out into the villages, to the bars, to the young ladies, and make sure they were treated, so they didn't continue to spread this good news any further. And so what we did all day was we rode around Okinawa from bar to bar in a Jeep. That's what we did. And they knew we had the power to quarantine them, so they would set up scotch for free. Good scotch, Chivas Regal. And we drank that all over Okinawa. And that's what we did. And pretty soon our tours of duty came up, and we came back to the United States, and he went back to Temple, and he finished his residency in cardiothoracic surgery. And today he is a cardiovascular surgeon. And as a matter of fact, he's head of the transplant team at Temple. And he's not yet been to AA. But he didn't ever need to be. And that's an interesting, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But he didn't need to be. And his behavior was identical to mine, or so it appeared in those days. But there was one big difference, and I'll get to that in a minute. But I went back up to Cornell, and I got my undergrad degree. I finished that last semester and spent the summer of 1963 as a freedom rider in Mississippi, which was a wonderful drunk. which was it was perilous enough. But to go down there drunk, we registered people to vote in Meridian, Mississippi, in the summer of '63, and it was. And we got out of there barely with our hide. And I finished my last semester at Cornell and applied to various medical schools and got tentatively accepted at a couple with the proviso that I had social problems, and that it would be best if I went out and worked for a while in the world for a year or so and then reapplied, and perhaps they would then I would be a candidate for a medical career in med school. And so I was confused and at loose ends, and I was at the kind of crossroads that I'm sure many of you have come upon when you were younger, and if you're young now, maybe you're upon them now, when you're confused and you know something is really wrong with you, but you don't know what it is. And you're not ready to label it as alcoholism for sure, but you know that something is wrong with you, that you are different, that your peers seem to be socializing, they're completing their education, they're getting married, they seem to know a secret, don't they? That you don't know. And the answer to that confusion for me has always been, get married. Right? I mean, so I got married, and I married a beautiful girl who was a Navy nurse that I had known in the Navy, and she was, God, I'll tell you, she deserved a better fate. To say that we were incompatible is to understate it. We never should have had a second date, let alone get married, but we did, and she got pregnant, and I got accepted to med school at USC in Southern California, so we moved out to Orange County, and we moved in with her parents. And so here I was with a brand new pregnant wife and brand new in-laws. To say that I didn't know the in-laws, I didn't know my wife, let alone the in-laws. It was really a strange environment. I had all summer to go before med school started at SC, so I needed a job for the summer, and I got a job as a bartender. And that turned out about as you would expect, coming home in the middle of the night, drunk, and, I made a great impression on this new wife and her parents, and that went on for a few weeks, and they finally realized they'd all made a bad mistake, and they threw me out, and I ended up on Bolsa Avenue in Orange County with a lot of Samsonite luggage and no money, and I got a job for the rest of the summer as an ambulance driver in Orange County. Now, I'm a blackout drinker, so the ambulance calls were colorful, as you can well imagine. The crowning glory to that career was one night in Newport Beach, driving around a cul-de-sac at 10 miles an hour with all the lights going into people's bedroom windows, and they're all coming out on the porch in their pajamas watching this ambulance go around this circle. You lock on to something you can't and I came out of a blackout, and I just couldn't get out of that cul-de-sac. I keep missing the turn every time I go around there. And they finally sent a police car into the cul-de-sac to lead me out. And they did. And I lost my job. And I lost my driver's license. And that's the package I brought to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's who I was when I got here. And I got sober, and a new profession opened up in civilian medicine called the Physician's Assistant Program. And I'm sure a lot of you know what PAs are out in this part of the country especially. And I became, because of the training at Bethesda, I became the third licensed PA in the state of California. And I went to work in an emergency room nights in East LA. Yeah, I got to tell you, that's really was exciting. It was. And I triaged that emergency room. And I was very good at what I did, and I was very well trained. And it was exciting. We got the shootings and the stabbings and all of the police work, plus the industrial injuries from places like Kaiser Steel, and all of it came into that emergency room. And I was the night guy in that emergency room, and it was really exciting and rewarding. But I wasn't getting any meetings then because the work was all at night. And I met another girl who was a really sweet, beautiful girl, daughter of a longtime sober AA member, and we fell in love, and we got married, and she went to Al-Anon, and we were just too cute. is what we were, okay? You know, I was in on the ground floor of this new profession, and she was a beautiful, bright girl, and we were just going to have this great future. But there was one problem. I had not taken these steps, and there was no recovery. And I would go into this emergency room at night, and I would get depressed, terribly depressed. And I would get feelings of inadequacy. Do you know what I'm talking about? Those feelings when you're not up to the task, when you know they're going to find out about you. Any day now, they're going to really find out that you're not who they think you are. And it leads to terrible depression. And if you have no program to deal with that, you need to rely on your medical education. And the answer to depression is dexedrine. 15 milligrams spantrules. Now, I'm not talking about these crappy little white pills you buy in a bag somewhere from some jerk. I'm talking about 15 milligrams spantrules of dexedrine. And before I was through with those, I was taking 5 or 6 of them a day. Now, if you know anything about amphetamine abuse, you will understand that's got you moving right along. Boy, I'll tell you, whatever you're doing, it will be in a hurry. And the problem with that is, along about the 4th or 5th day when you've not slept nor eaten, and your hair stands out on end like that, well, I tell you, eyes dilate out over here like this, and you look like you've just witnessed an axe murder. You know? And you show up in the emergency room to work, and the guy you're relieving looks at you and says, Vince, get some sleep. You need something to eat. And there's an anecdote for that. Thank God for science. And the anecdote for that's a drug called Demerol. Now, you all know about Demerol, don't you? Demerol is not a narcotic. I bet you didn't know that. It's really a synthetic. It's academic. Don't worry about it. And I began to use Demerol. Now, I got it. This is AA, so we need to talk about this. Narcotic addiction and alcoholism are not the same thing. They are different. And don't let anyone tell you they're the same, because they're wrong. They're not. And the difference is this. Narcotics are addictive. They all come from opium, heroin, morphine, Dilaudid, Perkins, all the same thing. It's all the same thing. All comes from opium, and it's addictive for everybody. You don't need an addictive personality. You don't need any of that gas. What you need is a syringe and a needle. That's it. You inject heroin intravenously or morphine intravenously, you will get addicted. Period. Case closed. Not true with alcohol. Turns out that 9 out of 10 people who drink alcohol do it with impunity. They're not like us. They're what is known as social drinkers. We represent only 1 out of 10 people who drink alcohol. The other 9 people who drink alcohol do not have our experience. They say things like, no more for me, right? I'm driving. Or I'd love to have another, but my wife's waiting dinner. I'm going home. Really? I'm going to Las Vegas. You know, that is the difference. They are known as social drinkers. And what they do is they drink, and they feel it, and they think, oh God, I'm feeling this, I better stop. It's time to go home. And that's what they do. They don't wreck cars, they don't destroy families, they don't abuse children, they don't abuse their wives or husbands, they don't get into monstrous debt until they're sober. Right? Their experience is different. And on the other hand, I have never met a social heroin user. There's a completely different dynamic. And so, anyway, the other problem with Demerol in the emergency room is people care about where it is. You know, I mean, it's really like they come in the morning and they open the narcotic drawer and all the dope is gone. They say things like, Vince, where's the Demerol? And I'd have to say, I don't know. I was here a minute ago. And you can imagine how that worked. And the people who care the most about Demerol, the people on the Medical Quality Assurance Board of the state of California, well, let me tell you, talk about we care. They came into that emergency room in the middle of the night one night, and the end result of the review of the narcotics laws, they placed me under arrest and charged me with a felony appropriating narcotics. We were not enlightened then. There were no diversion programs for physicians. The diversion program was we locked you up. And so they took me downtown to the Los Angeles County Jail in the middle of the night and booked me for a felony appropriating narcotics for my own use. It was subsequently reduced to a misdemeanor, and I did not have to go to jail. But I lost my medical license, and I ended up spending the summer of 1972 living in an apartment by the airport in LAX, underneath the flight path, the 707s in those days, drinking 1/2 gallon of vodka a day. That's how I spent the summer of 1972. And if you're in this room, I don't have to tell you what kind of drinking that is, do I? And the experience is the same, isn't it? If you drink 1/2 gallon of vodka a day, it's axiomatic, and the same things are going to happen to you. And only alcoholic, if you do that, you're an alcoholic, by the way. Social drinkers don't drink 1/2 gallon of vodka a day. And you get sick and you throw up and you're in blackouts, and if you wake up and it's 8:40, well, is that AM or PM? And you lose 30 pounds over that summer, and you have the shakes, and you seize a couple times, and I came out of a blackout. I'm perpetually in and out of blackouts, and I can't tell you what day it is or what time it is or what's happening or where I've been or where I'm going. I don't know. And I came out of a blackout. I find myself sitting on a bench by the Balboa Peninsula in Newport Beach, and the temperature is about 110, and I'm in a 3-piece wool suit and a white shirt and a tie, and the sun is beating down, and I don't know how. To this day, I can't tell you how I got to Newport Beach or why I went there, but I had some money, and I got a newspaper, and I went through the ads in the newspaper to find a job, and I found a job. I knew I needed a job. I had some money and some suitcase, and there was an ad in there for an apprentice embalmer for a mortician in Costa Mesa, California, and I lost my license. What am I going to do? So I applied for this job, and I went and I met with this undertaker, and he hired me, and the job was $85 a week, and a fringe benefit was this bachelor apartment over the room where they kept the caskets. Jesus, I'm telling you, it was, whoa. And the only access was through the casket room. I mean, try that with a hangover, and with the chimes playing and the birds chirping, and it would set you free. I'll tell you that. And it was a dreadful job, and I didn't like him, and he didn't like me, and I got drunk and I stole his hearse. On September the 20th, 1972, I came out of what I hope is my last blackout, driving the wrong way on Pacific Coast Highway in Newport Beach in a stolen hearse with a young lady next to me who I did not recall meeting, who was screaming at the top of her lungs. And I remember thinking, I really have this penchant for attracting these neurotic women. They really they all end up like this, and when I meet them, it always holds such promise. It looks like just wonderful things are going to happen. And then sometime after midnight, I'm going to look at her, and her eye makeup is coming down her face, and she's going to be screaming. And I remember telling this girl, you should get some counseling. You're really unstable. And that was September the 20th, 1972. Now, I have not had a drink of alcohol, nor have I used any mood-altering chemicals whatsoever from that date to this. And that's not remarkable in and of itself. There's plenty of people a lot more time than that. But what's remarkable is that if you could have materialized in the back of that hearse, and you could have foretold my future, what you would have told me would have been astounding. You would have said, today, you're going back to AA, and for the next 33 plus years, you're not going to drink, and you're certainly not going to use any mood-altering chemicals. But your experience in Alcoholics Anonymous is going to be completely different. It will be a totally different experience. And the reason for that will be because for the first time in your life, you will have the ingredient necessary for recovery. And that ingredient is called desperation. You will be desperate enough to take actions you do not agree with and direction from people you do not like. And as a result, something will happen to you that will enable you to take these steps and achieve a measure of recovery. Now, I would not have believed you. I would have said, you can tell me anything, but don't tell me that. I've been to AA. I have been to AA. And AA does not work for me. It might work for most of you. You're simplistic and you're not complex like me or multifaceted or, you are really, I can't do it. But I went back to AA that morning. I took the guy's hearse back to him. He was upset. He had called the cops, but then he called them off, and I packed my clothes and I went to this Alano club in Costa Mesa, California, and it was just this god-awful place, these dreary Alano club with Formica tabletops and 6 out-of-work Texas plumbers, sitting around talking about putting the plug in the jug, God. And I went to a meeting there that noon. It was dreadful. And I went to another meeting there that night, and that was dreadful. I ate donuts. I didn't have any money. And the manager of the club let me sleep on the sofa that night. And the next day I scrounged together some money. I don't know how, but I did. And I rented a room for $11 a week. And I thought, my God, have you ever seen an $11 a week room? I thought, I can't live in this kind of but I have to have nowhere else to go. And I don't think I can, I clearly have to be here a couple of weeks, right? Till I can get it together, till I can come up with an idea. And I don't think I can live here that long. 2 years later, when I moved out of that room, my perspective had changed, I will tell you. I spent my first 2 years of sobriety in Orange County, California. And it was really a remarkable 2 years. Things happened to me that I could not possibly have foretold or imagined. And most of them happened to me inside, although I could not have described that to you during that period of time. On the outside, my life was just god-awful. It was terrible. You couldn't believe the state I was in. If you would have asked me, you would have said, how are you doing? I would have said, I'm terrible. It's awful. I lost my medical license. I got and lost a series of jobs that you could not believe. I lost a job as a gas station attendant for being incompetent. Trying to do it right. I lost a job as a $1.87 an hour drill press operator in a machine shop where you walked in. The job was you walked in and you sat on a stool and you took this copper plate and you put it under the drill press and you pulled the handle and it put a hole in the middle of the copper plate and then you put the copper plate over here. That was it. That's the job. You can't do that wrong. Except I put the hole in the wrong place in about 1,000 of these goddamn copper plates. And the foreman came, who was from Dallas, and told me, he said, boy, I always call you boy, we got to let you go, son. He said, that's too bad. He said, I can see you're a real trier. He said, but you're not quite bright enough to do this kind of work. And I went off on it. I said, bright enough. I said, you redneck moron. I said, let me tell you something. I'm a graduate of an Ivy League university. I went to Cornell University. And you never do that with these guys. They're country slick. He said, well, I'll tell you what, boy. You ought to go on back and take the course in drill press operating. And I'll tell you what, he was right. He was right. And I remember leaving that machine shop and walking back to this dreadful room that I had in this god-awful boarding house for old men. God, Jesus. And I had a cold, and I had bronchitis, and I had a fever, and I had no medical insurance, and it was pouring rain. And I thought, Jesus, how the hell does this happen? How can you? And I got back to that room, and some mail had caught up with me. One letter was One piece of mail was a letter from a physician in upstate New York inviting me to join a committee for my college class reunion. How the hell do you answer that? I mean, what do you say? I can't make it this year, Dr. Medoff. I've just lost my job as a drill press operator. The incongruity of my life. You can't, how could that happen? You can't go from where I was to here. You can't have my privilege and my background and be this screwed up. It cannot happen. And that night I went to the big speaker meeting down on the Balboa Peninsula in Newport Beach. It's like this, boy, a great crowd, real exciting people, much like you are. And it was like that every Thursday night. Do you remember that meeting? Great. The Ebel Club was a great meeting. And it was a really high-end meeting. They'd tie their yachts up outside and come into this meeting. And I was a little out of place, but they were kind to me. They were just so kind to me. And it was a good meeting and a great meeting. And the speaker that night was, maybe the quintessential speaker in all of AA. It was a man named Norm Alpe. I don't know if you're, maybe some of you, I don't know if there's, God, I tell you, this is terrible. I don't know if there's anyone old enough in the room to remember him. I'm going to shoot myself. I really am. God almighty. Norm Alpe was Taper probably has tapes of him somewhere. Go get the tape. Listen to this guy. There was nothing fancy about his talk. He was just Mr. Everyman, but he was enthusiastic, and he was if Frank Capra made a movie about an AA speaker, it would be Norm Alpe. And Jimmy Stewart would play him. Okay? This is the kind of guy he was. He just gave this wonderful talk about how he was screwed up and he worked in the steel industry and he married this little red-headed Irish woman and she kept having babies on him every time he turned around. She was down at St. Luke's having another one and he came in and terrorized that family and terrorized that home, but now he was sober for a long time. And he would say nobody cried in his house tonight. Talked about these 4 daughters he had and how he would take them downtown now and buy them prom dresses. And they were getting married now, and he would go to the church and they would marry these jackasses who he didn't approve of. But he'd go to the church and there'd be 400 people there, and they'd all be from AA. And just great. And I listened to Norm talk that night, and I wish I could tell you he moved me, but he didn't. I just was so depressed, and I went back to this $11 a week room, this disgusting place. I had to walk back again in the rain. Second time in the day, rain. The only 2 times it rained the whole goddamn day were the times I was walking. The rest of the day the sun was out in California. The rain, when I walked home, it rained. And I got soaking wet again, and I got into this crappy room, and I did something so stupid. Stupid. I can't believe I ever did it. I was so desperate and so out of ideas. I found myself, before I knew it, on my knees beside the bed. And I said a prayer, and it had nothing to do with Aquinas, let me tell you. It was simply, God, please help me, because I'm afraid, I'm alone, and I don't think I can make it anymore. And I believe my recovery began that night. That's when it started. Now, there was no flash of light, and I went to bed and got up the next morning, and nothing had really changed. And I went over to that Alano Club for a cup of coffee because it's out of work now. And there was another guy that hung around that club, and he was sober 11 years. And his name was Clarence. And he was from Texas, turns out. But Clarence was a one-man floor covering guy. Do you know what I mean? The kind of guy that would go down and sell floor covering to these rich homes on Balboa Island, and then as soon as he'd make a sale, he'd run to the manufacturer and buy it, and then run back and install it. You know, he's an AA entrepreneur. Every Alano Club's got Clarence. But he was a good man. And Clarence said to me, how would you like a job? He said, you can go work for me. He said, you can be my gopher. He said, I know you can't cut carpet or anything, but you can carry the tools and go get the coffee, and I'll pay you $10 every day. And at the end of the day, we'll go to a Marie Callender's, which is a chain restaurant in Southern California, and I'll buy you dinner. Sounded like the presidency of General Motors to me. I mean, my overhead was low. I mean, you know. So I went to work for Clarence as a gopher. And he paid me $10 a day. And we'd end up at Marie Callender's, and we'd have dinner, and I would go to a meeting. And I began to say this prayer every night, this desperate prayer. And in the morning, I'd say, well, you kept me sober yesterday, God. Thank you so much. Thank you that I'm sober one more day. And that was it. There was nothing more than that. And I would go and work for Clarence and go to a meeting at night. And there's not a lot of success there for an Ivy League guy, is there? I mean, it's just dismal. But something had happened to me, and I didn't know what it was. I began to feel differently. Something happened inside, not outside. And I remember one night, and it was in the spring of the late spring of 1973. I found myself after dinner walking along the dock on Balboa Island on the Pacific Ocean, and the sun setting in the Pacific. I don't know if you ever get to Southern California, watch the sunset. Go down to Huntington Beach or Newport and watch the sunset. It's nothing like it. It's a spiritual experience. And I bought me a frozen banana. And I walked down that pier eating that frozen banana, looking at that sunset, and I realized something had really happened to me. And I could not articulate it. And it was frustrating because I'm a man that does not like to admit he can't articulate something. But I couldn't explain it, except something happened within me. And that told me that God was watching out for me, and that I didn't have to drink, and I didn't have to use any kind of a drug, and that I was going to be all right. And that's pretty good. That's a good deal. And life went on, and pretty soon I was coming up on my second birthday, and I knew I needed a sponsor. Now, I didn't have a sponsor. Now, I don't recommend this, but the reason I didn't have a sponsor is I knew who the sponsor had to be. And I did not like the idea. I didn't like this guy at all. He was a big shot speaker in AA. And every place he went, he carried this coterie of new people with him who were sycophants, who got his coffee and saved his seat. And it was disgusting is what it was. And he was crazy. You knew the man was insane. I mean, you listened to him speak for 5 minutes and you knew he was a bedbug. He was not, but he was also brilliant, but he was crazy. But there was something about him that was indisputable. He apparently had been given a gift to help the losers in Alcoholics Anonymous beyond anyone's imagination. The real losers, I mean, this guy could help anybody. And that we'd see them in Orange County, the dregs of humanity would drop out of sight, and word would have it that they'd got this guy for a sponsor, and they joined this fascist AA group on the west side of Los Angeles, and their lives would change, and they would turn up. I'll never forget one guy in particular. He was a biker. His name was, we used to call him Tank Top Red. He always wore a tank top. He had a filthy, matted beard. He never bathed. I don't think Red had a bath in years. And he had all of his teeth out in the front from fighting. And he always had a pint of Canadian Club in his pocket in the meeting. And he would walk in the meeting and pick out somebody to kill. Jesus, you would see Red in the meeting, you would think, oh no, Christ, not tonight. Not. And Red dropped out of sight. And word was that he got this guy for a sponsor. And we didn't hear any more about him. And then maybe 6 months later, we were sitting in a meeting in Newport, and somebody nudged me and they said, hey, there's Red. And I looked in the back of the room and I said, I don't see Red where? And they said, look closely. And there he was. Although his beard was shaved and his hair was cut and all his dental work was done, and he had on gray slacks and a blue blazer and penny loafers. And, he looked like a completely different human being. And somebody called on him to share, and he walks up to the podium and he said he'd been sober for 8 months, and 6 months ago he made his first child support payment in 10 years. And that he was working, and next month he was going to vote in the presidential election for the Republican, because he was a taxpayer now. And it drove me right over the edge. I mean, I thought, I saw, Christ, this was Red. And so I called this guy and I asked him to help me. Now, I had acquired some material possessions by then. I had acquired a 1964 red Chevrolet convertible that had no brakes and a hole in the top. And I used to drive that to meetings in Orange. I'd drive that to that big speaker meeting on the Ebell Club. And everyone would see me coming in that car, and they'd immediately get in their Mercedes and BMWs and put them on the other side of the lot. They were always asking me questions like, do you have insurance on that car? I hadn't had a driver's license in 3 years. Why the hell would I have insurance? It was redundancy. And so And he said, I want you to come to this mission. He ran this mission on Skid Row in Los Angeles, and he said, I want you to drive your car up here and have lunch with me. And so I drove this uninsured, beat-up Chevy with no brakes into downtown L.A. and parked it in front of the Midnight Mission. And I went in and I talked to this guy. And I'll never forget what he told me. And if you're new, I hope somebody says something like this to you someday. He said, I will help you under one condition, that you can accept the simple proposition that your best judgment about your life is terrible, and that my judgment about your life is infinitely better than yours. And if you will do everything I suggest you do, without debate, I will help you. Well, I was desperate enough that day to make that unholy pact with the devil. I agreed to do that. And he had me, the first thing he did was he took away my car. Took away my car. He said, you don't have insurance in that car, do you? I wonder how everybody knew that, you know. He said, you don't have a driver's license either, do you? And I said, yeah, but I'm going to, he said, give me the keys. And then I said to him, why should I give you the keys to my car? And he said the next profound thing I've ever heard. He said, you should give me the keys to your car because law-abiding citizens such as myself have the right to drive free from fear in the city streets from morons like you. Difficult to argue with that, isn't it? So I gave him the keys. He said, I'm going to park this car in front of my house in Venice. And we play baseball, and you're going to move into this mission and do a lot of things. You're going to live here. And I thought, Jesus, Christ, just live in a mission? I said, I'm looking for upward mobility. You don't understand. But I did what he said. And they played softball across the street from his house every Saturday, and they go to Rouge Yard, and they have hot dogs for lunch. And he said, you can visit your car. And then when you get a job and get a driver's license, you can get your car back. And well, it turned out I'm not going to get that. There's no time to tell you the whole story about the gum on the pants and all that's for another evening. But what happened was I did get to visit my car every Saturday. And it got very depressing. It turned out I lived in that mission for 8 months. And what he told me to do, I'll tell you what he told me to do. He said, what I want you to do is come down here every, I'll tell you, it'll be quick. Come down here every day, Monday through Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I put on that 3-piece suit, and I'm going to give you an allowance. I'm going to give you $8. And I want you to take the $8, go outside and get on the 83 bus that runs up Wilshire Boulevard. And when you get on the bus, you get a series of transfers from the bus driver. Because every time you come to a medical facility between downtown L.A. and the San Fernando Valley, you go in and tell them you're sober and Alcoholics Anonymous for over 2 years, and you need your medical license back, and you need a job, and can they help you? Now, I thought this was the worst possible, this is preposterous, stupid. I mean, I could have thought of that, right? And I was about to tell him that, but what I said was, okay. So I did it. And every morning I'd go into his office and I'd get this crummy, I tell him today, he owes me money. It wasn't a lot. $8 was a pretty crummy allowance if you ask me. But anyway, I'd get the $8 and I'd go outside and I'd get on that bus and I'd ride up Wilshire Boulevard and I'd go in every medical practice between downtown LA and the San Fernando Valley in over 8 months. Nobody would help me, and I saw them all multiple times. And then finally, one sunny morning in June of 1975, I was in a 3-piece pinstripe black suit, a white shirt, and a tie. I went outside and I got on the 83 bus and I sat down in this huge wad of chewing gum all over the back of my trousers. I mean, geez, it was just, And I got off the bus halfway up Wilshire Boulevard and I went into this service station to clean the chewing gum off my trousers with a wet paper towel. I don't know if you've ever done that. It was just, and it went all down the legs. I mean, it was just this unbelievable. I remember looking in the mirror, seeing myself. I mean, here I was, 3-piece coat, vest, tie, black socks, and shorts, and this pants. It looked like something from a 1940 porno movie. It just really, just the most grotesque human being you have ever seen in your life. And it flashed on me. I was 2 years and 8 months sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a graduate of an Ivy League university. I live in a mission. I don't have a car. I don't have a job. I don't have any money. You know, I'm in a gas station with my pants in my hand with gum all over my ass. I mean, I don't know of anybody doing as bad as I am in all of AA. I mean, I don't know. And I thought, I might as well drink. And maybe the only thing that will save me from drinking, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm willing to sit in a movie for a couple hours. And maybe I won't drink. And I put my pants back on, and I went outside, got back on the damn bus, and rode all the way to the end of the line to the ocean, to Santa Monica. And they had a cafeteria, the kind where you go in and get a tray and go by and get your lunch and then set it on the table and go outside and get a newspaper. And I was getting the newspaper, the busboy came by and took my lunch. That's the way it was. I mean, that's the kind of a day it was. It was just and I walked from Santa Monica to Westwood Village, UCLA campus, and bought a ticket to a movie, The Godfather 2 was the movie. That dates me, doesn't it, girls? And I heard somebody call my name, and I turned around and came face to face with the administrator of the medical center in which I had been arrested in for taking the Demerol. And he said, his eyes lit up. He said, "Vince, you look terrific. You look great." He said, "How are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm 2 years and 8 months sober in AA, and I don't drink and I don't use drugs." And he put his arms around me and he started to cry. He said, "We thought you were dead or in an institution. He said, "I'm so glad to see you." He said, "When have you worked last?" And I said, "Well, I haven't worked in a long time." He said, "This is amazing." He said, "We have a urologist that's just joined our group practice who's a member of the Medical Quality Assurance Board. And he's going to be in the clinic tomorrow. And I want you to come down." And he said, "We're going to have lunch. I'm going to introduce you. The three of us are going to have lunch. And we're going to see what you can do about getting your license back. And if you can get your license back, how would you like to go back to work in the same emergency room?" And I went down and I met that urologist, and within 60 days my medical license was restored in the state of California. And I went back to work in the very same emergency room in which I was arrested in for stealing Demerol. And I worked there for the next 2.5 years. And no drugs were missing. And the patients got good care because I gave it to them. And I took these steps, 1 through 12. And I had a lot of amends to make. I didn't even have a driver's license. I had to ride the bus to and from work. I was the only medical professional you ever knew that wasn't allowed to have a checking account by this god-awful Nazi sponsor. And he made me get paid and take the check to his office in this mission. And we'd walk up to the bank and we'd cash it, and then we'd go back down and sit at his office and buy money orders to pay people that I'd ripped off. And we'd get a handful of money orders, and he would be taking phone calls in his desk. If you've ever been in his office, his desk is a mess. He's slurping coffee all over the money orders, and I think he doesn't know what he's doing. What the hell does he know? Except I did what he said, and I paid back all of this money with money orders, riding a bus, and my life changed. And I took these steps, 1 through 12. I wrote that inventory. That moral inventory. And if you're new, that's the word you want to key on, moral. It is not a psychological inventory. It is not designed to get you in touch with your feelings. Who cares how you feel? It is designed to make you better. We want to know your secrets. That's what this is about. Your secrets. And who you resent and why you resent them. And when you make amends to the people you resent, you don't resent them anymore. You forgive them. And you're free. You are free. It's freedom. And I wrote that inventory and took it with this sponsor, reading it by the flashlight on the dashboard of his car while he rode up to Ventura where he was going to make a talk. And he told me how to approach the steps 5 and 6, or 6 and 7. And I did. And as I said, we paid the money back. And my life flourished. And wonderful things happened to me. I got into a new career. And, well, first I met this cute little redhead in 1976 in September. I met her in September. We got married in October and divorced in November. And the last time I saw her, she was on the way back to her daddy's ranch in El Dorado, Texas. They're still getting me. But in 1975, a woman got sober in our group, and she was her husband was dying of lung cancer, and she took care of him while he was sick, and she got sober at the same time. And that's quite a thing. That's not an easy trick. And she was, and she looked pretty good in a bikini in those days too, I might add. I like to throw that in. And she was a knockout, is what she was. And her husband did pass away, and we started to see each other, and we dated, and we fell in love, and we got married. And we had an AA wedding. We didn't have any money. I just started a new job, and she didn't have much money. She was working in a law office. But we loved each other, and we got married. We got married in an AA guy's backyard, and the women all brought the food, and it was a terrific wedding. We were broke, so we couldn't go anywhere. Well, we had to wait till everyone left so we could open the envelopes to see if there was enough money to go anywhere. That kind of a wedding. And we did, and there was enough money to go to Knott's Berry Farm. And that's where we went on our honeymoon. We went down there on Sunday, and we came back on Monday, and everybody went back to work. Well, I'll tell you what. That marriage has lasted 25 years. And she never gets hysterical. Not once. And I want to tell you about my wife. I love my wife more with every breath I take. And I say that to you without embarrassment. That's a gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. We have a spectacular marriage. It's a wonderful marriage. It's the best marriage I know. And it gets better every day. And we've had bad times. They changed the laws. I had a great counseling business. I made a lot of money. I had BMWs and Mercedes and big homes in Pasadena. And they changed the law, and we had to sell the homes. And I celebrated that with a heart attack and had bypass surgery. And we went through all of that, but we never missed a beat. Our marriage got stronger, and we loved each other. We were surrounded by the people in Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon who loved us and cared for us. And we got through that, and things got better. And 2 years ago, I got diagnosed with colon cancer, and I had to have surgery, and I had to have chemo, and chemo damn near killed me. Put me in the intensive care unit at the City of Hope for the month of February with staph pneumonia that they didn't think I would live. And I had 6 liters of oxygen. It means nothing unless you're a medical professional. That's a lot of oxygen for a month. And one day the antibiotics started to work, and I got better. But during that time, Pat had to work, so she couldn't be there all the time. But I would wake up in the middle of the night, and there would be Al-Anons in my room in the ICU to take care of me. And that's okay, let me tell you. And they would make me drink Ensure. Have you ever had an Al-Anon come at you with a glass of Ensure? You will drink it. You will drink it. But they were there for us, and they loved us. And so if you have anything bad to say about Al-Anon, don't say it to me. And our lives are good. And this June was our 25th wedding anniversary. And we didn't go to Knott's Berry Farm. We went to Paris. And so we're doing okay. And the cancer is clear. And so I learned how to be a man in this relationship. I learned what marriage is and what relationships are. And I have some advice for you. If you are new and young and male, boy, I've got some good advice for you. If you take it, you will save yourself years of untold grief. Carefully. Listen. Women are not the enemy. They are your loving, equal partners. Equal in every way. The checkbook and every other way. They are to be cherished, listened to, and at times obeyed. If you do this, and you understand this, your marriage will be remarkable. It will be wonderful. It has with ours. We are equal, and we have a tremendous life. And with all of the ups and downs, life is fantastic. And so if you're new here tonight, welcome. I've talked too long, but it sure has been a pleasure to be here. God bless you.